Welcome to Holding the Line, a podcast about cops, courts, and crime. I'm LELDF President Jason Johnson, joined by my co-host Sean Kennedy, our Director of Policy. Today's episode is, I'd say, a little different than a normal Holding the Line episode. Fascinating interview, I think, with Rob Quick, who is the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Harbor of Grace, a treatment center located in Maryland. It works exclusively with first responders with anything from substance use disorder to post-traumatic stress to any of the other many things that aren't unique to first responders, but first responders are uniquely exposed to these kinds of challenges in their lives. And Harbor of Grace is just doing a fantastic job at focusing on first responders, law enforcement officers, firefighters, EMTs, paramedics, dispatchers. They even work with nurses and doctors who work in emergent settings and others. Rob, he's a 26-year law enforcement veteran, and I know him personally. He's just an incredibly well-respected law enforcement officer for his work, but he even gets into some of his own personal story about what landed him as a patient at Harbor of Grace initially, and it's just a fascinating story.
It absolutely is. And one of the things that strikes you about it is how much these first responders go through every day is just inconceivable to the average civilian as to what's on their plate. And all the trials and tribulations we all have are just magnified by the job. And people like Rob and others that are going out of their way to help people are really lifting that burden and allowing them to get back to a fully functional life. And one of the sad things that's happened, obviously, in the last 10 or so years, and obviously been accelerated since 2020, is how much the people all around them in the public and in political power have created a hostility for them when they go to work. And it's one of the many things that weighs down so many first responders and makes their lives harder and their mental health less healthy.
Rob gets into that about people who pursue these jobs. It's mostly we're talking about law enforcement officers. He acknowledges that today's political climate makes it very difficult. It's disorienting to a lot of the men and women who have been in the job 10, 15, 20 or more years, took the job because they wanted to help people. They wanted to be law enforcement officers. And some of the rhetoric you hear from their leaders, people in leadership roles, are so antithetical to what they thought the job was. It's just very disorienting. And Rob uses an analogy in the interview for what a life for a career in one of these roles is like, and how you kind of develop these repeated exposures to trauma and other things. And this is just one more thing for these men and women to deal with, is the harsh political climate that is, it's difficult to deal with. So a great interview with Rob. I'm just really proud of the work that he and his colleagues are doing at Harbor of Grace in particular. We're joined by Rob Quick. Rob's a retired lieutenant from the Baltimore Police Department, and currently he's Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Harbor of Grace National Law Enforcement and First Responder Wellness Center. Welcome, Rob. Good to have you.
Great to be here, Jason.
I want to talk to you about your current role at Harbor of Grace. Harbor of Grace is located in Havre de Grace, Maryland, which is northeast Maryland, pretty close to Baltimore, Philly, New Jersey, Delaware. Just explain what Harbor of Grace is all about.
Harbor of Grace is a treatment facility that only treats first responders who are struggling with either substance abuse or mental health related diagnoses. So we treat cops, firemen, veterans, active duty military from all 50 states, specializing, of course, in the Northeast region, as you just mentioned. We have patients that come and fly in from all over the country to get treatment. We offer both inpatient and outpatient treatment services. Majority of our patients who are struggling with substance use or actively have thoughts of self-harm, we're really going to encourage them to participate in inpatient treatment, which generally speaking is in the neighborhood of a 28-day stay with us. That's variable, but that's about average. For those who have less acute symptoms, not necessarily struggling with the substance, but more stress or anxiety, burnout, mild depression or anxiety, or have just been involved in a traumatic incident and they want to really kind of process that incident on the front end before some of these symptoms can set in. We do outpatient treatment as well. And I like to refer to that as in-service training. Our outpatient program basically is a Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 program. So if you live within a reasonable drive commute of the facility and can participate in that, that's some fantastic outpatient treatment as well.
You mentioned to me how some of the folks that come to you seeking treatment just need outpatient treatment, but they're not driving distance. And so, but you have the ability there that even for outpatient treatment, you have places where people can stay during the course of their treatment, even though technically they're outpatients. Is that right?
Exactly. So you're not going to commute back and forth from Long Island to Havre de Grace, Maryland every day just to get treatment. So the level of care that you need may be an outpatient level of care, but based on that distance and that commute, we're going to house you inpatient, and we don't charge dorm fees. The treatment is all covered by insurance companies. We're in network with all the majors, and then that way you just have the convenience of an inpatient stay and get the treatment that you need.
I can tell you that for maybe some of our listeners, it comes as a surprise that law enforcement officers and other first responders need this kind of treatment. Unless you've experienced it from the inside, people tend to see first responders as superhuman and don't have the same problems, frailties, concerns, issues, whatever you want to call it, that everyone else does. Because sometimes, for better or worse, people think of cops and firefighters and others as just not being subject to that sort of thing. I can tell you from my experience, it's not the case at all. All of the things that happen to the rest of the population, and in some cases, even more so focused on, we're a law enforcement related show, so I'm going to focus on law enforcement. But has it been your observation in your role that, law enforcement officers tend to bring at least as many of these things that you've rattled off as conditions, concerns, health conditions, however you want to look at it, that the population does? Is it more prevalent, less prevalent, or where do we stand?
Yeah, I feel for sure it's more prevalent. I mean, just break down the nature of the job, the shift work, the constant change in schedule, the shortages that plague most agencies where officers are being, drafted into additional duties beyond their normal tours of duty. The fact that they can't regularly get days and holidays off that they want to spend time off to unwind due to deployments or staffing concerns. Then you just take, the climate that is today with some of the animosity towards, law enforcement with events that are in the national headlines. So there's more of a spotlight on your actions. You're wearing a body camera that's recording your actions every moment of your tour of duty for the world to review and see. So you start piling that on, and there's just a general anxiety that can begin to kind of develop, and just general stress showing up for the job. Now, take that into, any major city that has a crime problem, and now you're putting yourself out there, in a dangerous format, time and time again. If you've been doing this job for any length of time, people who've been severely injured on the job. People who've lost their lives on the job. People who've lost their careers. So you start to add all that up. And it's understandable that people then turn to forms of self-medication. They start to abuse a substance, or start having unhealthy relationships, or just isolate, become depressed, and these things compound. And Jason, you hit it, our culture of, we're there to help others. We don't ask for help for ourselves. That stigma then compounds, and before you know it, you find yourself in an unhealthy cycle of isolation or dependency or just stress and anxiety, and it leads to bad choices and bad behaviors that aren't healthy for you. Thankfully, we're seeing that stigma is starting to go away. People are starting to raise their hand and say, "Hey, I need help." And more departments are doing a good job of creating wellness units or dedicating resources towards, officer safety and wellness to try to get in front of these incidents, and provide resources for people who need help before negative habits compound themselves or negative consequences arise.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot there. Not only the stigma, which is one thing, which exists in the culture. I've in my career been both in law enforcement and in the fire service, so I understand both cultures. The culture of, as you pointed out, of identifying things that you need help with individually, personally. It just doesn't really exist. The focus has been on the job, on the team. It was very rare that somebody would come forward and say, "I need help with this." Either it's a substance abuse issue or it's even a problem at home or whatever, people just kind of sweep that off to the side and it festers. And it's good to know that that culture is changing. I can see that it's changing, and I see more departments are internally building the capacity to focus on the wellness of employees, all around wellness. I mean, it means everything from financial issues to potential substance abuse, domestic issues that come up. It pretty much runs the whole gamut. Is there a concern, particularly for law enforcement? If you put your hand up and say, I have a problem, I feel like I'm drinking too much and I might have a dependency, can I get some help? What are you seeing? How departments treat that? I mean, that's something that could potentially, in the wrong circumstances, become a fitness for duty issue or even a discipline issue. What are you seeing out there now today?
I think some departments do a much better job than others at how they handle this. But by and large, I would say it's been my experience that for those who self-report, for those who raise their hand and say, I need some help before there's disciplinary matters already attached to that ask for help, generally speaking, I'm seeing the departments are working with those individuals. We'd be burying our head in the sand to say that the law enforcement culture is not a culture of drinking alcohol, or where is not a culture of work hard, play hard. Every law enforcement officer out there knows another law enforcement officer who got a DWI or had an issue with some kind of a substance. Now, with marijuana becoming more legal, and kratom is another substance that we're seeing a lot of people begin to use and abuse. So it's not just alcohol. There's other substances as well. But what I'm seeing for the most part, most agencies, if the member raises their hand and said, I need help, the agencies are working with them. We've literally had officers promoted while in treatment.
Wow.
The departments, recognize that it's the right thing for the person to do to get help, and they're not going to let this affect their career. We treat many federal agents, and of course, there's always concern around, maintaining a security clearance while asking for help. And we've had many successful federal agents be able to complete treatment, maintain their security clearance, and carry on as if nothing ever happened. So most agencies are doing a good job with that. The problem, of course, comes sometimes if someone's only willing to get help after a negative consequence, after something has happened at work that leads to disciplinary matters. Well, then raising your hand to go and get treatment doesn't necessarily make that go away, but certainly can be a mitigating factor going forward.
How important is it for first responders in particular that if you need this sort of treatment, any of the things that are provided at Harbor of Grace, any of the many things, that it be done in an environment where you're surrounded by your peers, other people who have experienced some of the same things that you have?
Yeah. Jason, that's a fantastic question. And I think it's extremely important, right? So a typical barrier to treatment that we hear is, oh my God, well, I don't want to be in treatment with people who maybe I've arrested before, or people from my community who now all of a sudden are going to see me in a different light. So getting treatment at one of the thousands of treatment centers nationwide that treat the general public, that's a concern for a lot of people. You come here, it's only other first responders who are struggling with the same thing that you are. So one, you realize you're not the only one struggling, that other people are. So that brings a sense of comfort. Two, in my opinion, a lot of first responders who may have been struggling for a while maybe use that first responder status as a bit of a crutch to explain some of their behavior or excuse some of their behavior. Well, when they're in treatment with other first responders, that goes away a little bit too. Nobody can call us out on our BS better than our brothers and sisters who know what is BS and what is not. So where the therapist is the guiding force in steering the treatment, oftentimes the other patients do a really good job of policing the other patients.
Internal accountability.
Yeah. Come in day one and the denial is still pretty strong in you. And before you know it, the staff or the therapist don't have to say a word to you to get you to start seeing the light. It's the other patients who do that. So an environment where you're amongst your peers, an environment that is safe, because you don't have concerns of the outside people that you're going to see, and then a population that gets you. And at any given time, our population is from, a academy members, people who are still in service academies, all the way to retirees, and from chiefs of police to police officers, right? So that spectrum of experience, that spectrum of time on the job, and it really gives you that exposure to different people is phenomenal. One of the side benefits we see here around promotional season, you might be here to get treatment for your depression or your alcohol use, but promotional season's coming up. Well, guess what? You're going to spend the next 3 weeks with a couple of chiefs and some gold badges from other agencies. So before you know it, they're throwing impromptu study sessions together for
Right.
you around the lunch table or before sessions, helping guiding you on that next exam or that next promotion or that transfer to a specialized unit, right? It's all this camaraderie that occurs in a place like this. And then when you leave, you're in a text thread with 20, 30 other individuals that instantly become your support system and accountability partners for when you're out of here. And because we've treated people from all 50 states for so long, we have a vast network of alumni patients who are willing to say, yeah, by all means, you got somebody in my region, include me as part of their aftercare. It networks from there, from a peer support structure. Really fantastic. And I don't think you get any of that
Yeah,
in a
no
treatment
doubt.
setting where there's very few first responders in treatment.
No question. So one of the observations I've made in having worked in two large police departments and having visibility and or leadership over the internal affairs part of those departments, I just have observed that the really overwhelming majority of off-duty misconduct cases of all varieties are related to alcohol use
Yeah.
by law enforcement officers. And it's fair to say that although there are instances in which law enforcement officers are involved in other substances beyond alcohol, I think that's really the focus for law enforcement. Law enforcement officers they want to keep their job for the most part, and they've been screened in a way where for the most part new law enforcement officers have had little historic exposure to drugs, illegal substances. And so although that does happen, and I don't know what you've seen overall in your role there, but I think it's mostly alcohol is what I've seen, and occasionally something other than alcohol. But the vast majority of the off-duty misconduct is alcohol related. And so in a day and time where it's tough to recruit in law enforcement and it's tough to maintain your complement of officers because of, all the issues you pointed out, and just with respect to how society sees law enforcement officers nowadays, if you've got a good employee and they come forward and say, here's something I'm struggling with, it really makes all the sense in the world to say, look, we're going to prevent you from getting to the point where where you develop a discipline problem, you get in trouble, you get a DWI, you get into a fight with someone because your judgment is impaired or whatever. Yeah, of course you should go to treatment. So Rob, what got you involved in this role? Obviously you had a career as a law enforcement officer. And now it seems, I think, for most people to say, well, that seems kind of like a strange retirement job for a veteran cop to go into a treatment center that, of course, it's focused on first responders, but still unusual retirement job for a cop. So can you explain that?
I became familiar with Harbor of Grace when in 2019, I was a patient here. I myself had struggled with alcohol for a period of time. I joined the Baltimore City Police Department in 1995. Work hard, play hard mentality of the job. And the play hard part of that generally involved social use of light beer in the off time. And over a 20+ year career, the light beer became heavy beer became liquor, and liquor became problem. And I needed treatment here and came here in 2019, did a full 28-day inpatient treatment. Was the best decision that I'd ever made for myself. It was fantastic. And when I completed treatment, I stayed connected to the place because I believed in how powerful the experience was for me personally. and that I wanted to be able to kind of help guide others who were on the fence about getting help them to make the right decision for themselves. Certainly, again, before consequences had to be dire. So I did return to duty for the BPD after treatment for a period of time, and ultimately left the agency in 2021. When I left in 2021, I was offered the opportunity to come here and be part of the staff. I could think of no better thing to do as a second career than to try to help my fellow brother and sister law enforcement members in getting help if they needed it, to be able to explain a little bit of my story and how I got there, and try to encourage people to do what was the right thing for them. It was a fantastic experience, and from 2021 to present, I worked my way up to executive vice president and COO. I now help to run the day-to-day of this place. And honestly, I've been given the honor to present at the FBI National Academy to sessions of, police commanders who come through there. Recently did a training down at the FLETC Center in Maryland. We present to many different people where I very openly share my story as a cautionary tale of how someone very dedicated to the job, very, very high performer, can fall prey to an alcohol trap that eventually caused a lot of problems for me. And I want to see other people not make those same mistakes.
Well, I think you're a fantastic spokesman because you have walked the walk. You're, people, anyone who knows you, Rob, and I had the pleasure of knowing you and working directly with you for a few years at BPD, is that, everybody, you are it's fair to say you're a high performer. Everybody in the organization really respected your work. And I'm sure everyone in your current sphere respects your work, and not only your current work, but where you came from personally and professionally. And I just think that it's great to have you as a spokesman going around talking to like the FBI, NA, and other organizations. I know you presented recently for the Police Executive Research Forum. And so I think, to the extent that your ministry here doing this work gets through to people in law enforcement leadership roles and help them see, I think there's a perception that the types of people that are going to struggle with these issues aren't your highest performing people. And that's not really true. And, I don't think people should be discarded because they put their hand up and say, I have something I'm struggling with, whether it's substance use disorder or any of the other things that that at Harbor of Grace that you treat with first responders. I think it's a good development, the things that we've talked about. So let's talk about what some of the other things. So we've talked about substance use disorder quite a bit, that leads people to residential treatment there. But what are some of the other things that you're seeing people, either inpatient or outpatient, that are, just some of the examples, PTSD, occupational trauma, grief and loss, childhood trauma, anxiety and depression. And then this one I really like, compassion fatigue. That's a term I thought I invented many years ago when I was a paramedic, but I guess I didn't because it's in your literature. But, there is this thing where in years of service, in any form of being a first responder, is you come into the job with the best of intentions, hoping to help. I mean, everyone in their interview says, I want to help people. And I think most of the people are serious. That's what they want to do, either whether you're seeking a law enforcement job or a firefighter or a paramedic or any other of these roles. And then something happens where over time, you can no longer offer that help the way you could before. Is that something you guys see, people that they're just kind of worn out, burned out, can't do it anymore? Or think they can.
Yeah. So it comes in a couple of different ways. One, I would just put more in the burnout category. I've been doing this for 10, 15, 20, 30 plus years. Just feel like they can't do it anymore. Maybe it's a recent change of assignment where someone spent the last tail end of their career in an administrative role, and now they're being asked to go back out on the street in some capacity, and they just don't feel they have it in them anymore. Or maybe it's a change in leadership or a political structure that's now all of a sudden the catalyst for, I just can't do it. Or again, it's just that slow burn. They just feel like they've been doing it for too long. So they get treatment again, and that's a classic outpatient treatment experience there. To come in, be in a setting where there's going to be, other people that feel exactly the same way, who've walked exactly in their shoes, to be able to, lean on one another, and work with a good qualified therapist on processing what that looks like, and then be able to make, a conscious decision of, so what do I want to do? Have I done enough? And do I not owe anyone anything? And is it time to tap out and go and move on? Is that the best thing for me? Or find coping mechanisms and solutions to be able to kind of process that, stay in the job, but be able to do it in a healthy and more productive manner without all that stress weighing on them. One of the hardest things for me to do as an employee here at first was, spending so much time in the police department, and particularly as a supervisor, over 20 years of my career as a supervisor. You want to encourage that person to carry on. You want to encourage them to get through and stay the course, because the job needs them, and that's what we want to do. Sometimes the right thing for the person is to tell them it's time to move on. It's just time. And people come here and realize that. They're offline while they're here in treatment. They're away from the grind of the job. They can just think through what they want to do next and what that looks like. So, and when we're here to support them in what's going to be best for them. Grief and loss. People lose loved ones. They lose a spouse. They lose a partner. They lose a child. And they struggle just with the strength day to day to move on with that loss. We want them to be able to process that loss. Our therapists, we have 9 different therapists. They have different specialties. Some of them specialize in grief and loss. Some of them specialize in trauma. Some of them specialize in substance use. So we do our best to pair the patient up with who we feel is going to be the best therapist, and let them work through their specific problems. But Jason, what we find out is, people, you can't just put them in one bucket. They come here for a substance use. It's the second DWI. Clearly, they need to rethink their drinking. But you find out that they drink a lot because they didn't process appropriately a grief or a loss or a traumatic incident. Almost invariably, those with multiple DWIs have been in police-involved shootings, have lost co-workers on the job, going through divorces, right? You check all the boxes, and if you start to rewind, you see, wow, no wonder they turned to alcohol. Look at all these things that this person went through, that sadly they didn't process in a healthy manner. They never sought help, and then it crescendoed into a situation. So, we get that person here, and of course, we want to encourage them to revisit their relationship with alcohol. But then we also want them to process that loss, to process that grief, to work through that trauma. And then as you get comfortable with them, and they start talking about all that, you find out there was childhood abuse in their background, or other circumstances, and it's like, man, where do you really begin? Patients, they often come here thinking that they're getting treatment for one thing, and before you know it, they're going down all kind of other roads.
Yeah. One of the things I always kind of observed or thought in during my career is that I think a lot of the lay public focus is that people are generally aware that first responders are exposed to some pretty horrific things, and that exposure to those things isn't good for your mental health, and it can lead to all sorts of problems for the individual. And that's true. I don't discount that at all. But I think one of the things I always kind of thought is it's usually it's not just one thing. So you might go to a horrific scene of like where there's some terrible violence has happened, or, if it involves children, that's always a huge trigger for people. But in my experience and my thought is that it's usually more of a cumulative thing. It's not, it's like, of course, there are terrible scenes that you might be exposed to, but that alone, if that was the only thing you ever saw or experienced, it's unlikely to lead to PTSD or other bad consequences to you personally. But when you spend a whole career not only dealing with repeated responses to those types of traumatic things, but you're also dealing with all of the pressures that law enforcement officers and other first responders deal with. You have sometimes a bad boss, who, sometimes you're going through some problems with your spouse at home. You might experience loss, as you mentioned, to some relative. Um, you may have gotten passed over for promotion too many times, or not been able to be home for a certain holiday or birthday for your family. It's like all of these things together, they kind of add up and accumulate, and then that's what can result in problems. Is that fair to say that it's generally that cumulative effect that leads to problems?
Very fair. So we like to use the analogy, everybody's got a backpack, and every one of those events that you just mentioned is a stone that you pick up and put in your pack. Every bad call for service, every fight that you got into, every one of those things you just said is a stone that goes in the backpack. And if you don't take the time proactively to take the backpack off every once in a while and start to dump some of the stones out, eventually the strap breaks. And the incident that breaks it could be a pebble or it could be a boulder. But if you don't empty that bag regularly, eventually the strap breaks and you don't know what that's going to look like. So yes, it's exactly what you've said. It is cumulative. Again, a good portion of our police and firemen who are here, they're prior military service. So it's not just what they
Mhm.
see on the job as an active duty law enforcement officer, but what they may have encountered in the military. Again, going back to childhood experiences, what kind of environment did they grow up in, and what did that family situation look like? And when it comes to substance abuse, there is a hereditary angle as well. Alcoholism is a disease that is passed down generation to generation. So again, you start to look at all that and you say, wow, how does this person survive any of it? Right?
If they had an alcoholic parent, there's also not only the genetic link, but also a possibility that there was dysfunction in their childhood, maybe some form of
Absolutely.
abuse and so forth, and it all adds up. And then on the job, all the stressors that you get. Now, I'm going to ask you a question that might seem political. If it is, you can dodge it. It's not meant to be political, but we are the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, after all. Is is one of those stressors nowadays for the cops, particularly for the cop, not so much for other first responders, but for the police officers and other law enforcement people that are seeking treatment for any of these things at Harbor of Grace, is a significant part of their backpack, to use your analogy, that the rocks in their backpack is one of those rocks, the political environment that cops are facing, where it seems like a kind of a no-win situation. Oftentimes you've got people in leadership roles, mayors and others, who don't seem to support what they're doing, the risk of being involved in an incident, or maybe some of the people that you're seeing have been involved in an incident that's highly controversial, leads to a lot of criticism, fair and unfair. Is that a thing nowadays? Does that add to the backpack of the law enforcement officer today?
Absolutely no question. The climate in general, consent decree practices have certainly brought more scrutiny upon law enforcement and put some extra hoops in there for people to jump through. The political elections at a particular state or local level can add complexity as to whether that political leader tends to be more favorable or less favorable to law enforcement as a whole. Again, the fact that every action now is captured on video. Certainly the majority of my career, there wasn't as much prevalence of cell phone video or stationary video where an officer's actions are dissected and Monday morning quarterback to the nth degree all the time. All this absolutely compounds the situation and makes things much worse than what I think it has to be.
Yeah, that's kind of what I would have figured. So,
Actually, and Jason, if I can throw in a little bit of the moral injury aspect of that too is again without taking a political side, but we're seeing officers who they don't believe in the mission they're being asked to do. I
uh,
guess is probably the best way to summarize that, right? Everybody knows catch the robber, catch the rapist or the murderer, but some things now that theft that was illegal for most officers for the
mhm.
majority of their career is now legal, and drugs that were illegal are now all of a sudden legal. But now certain enforcement actions I was never asked to take before, I am being asked. So you're asking me to enforce certain things that I don't necessarily think should be illegal, and things that have historically been illegal are all of a sudden now legal, I kind of don't know what end is up. We
Yeah.
see that a lot as well.
Yeah, I mean, that could lead someone who's a 10, 15, 20-year law enforcement veteran who has no problem doing what they signed up to do, which was being a law enforcement officer, right? So that's what I signed up for. That's what I did all this work toward. And now you're telling me that's not really what we want from you anymore.
Right.
We don't need you to
Right.
do that anymore. It's like you're being put out to pasture, but you're not out to pasture yet. And I could see how that could lead someone to any number of those, that litany of things that have to be treated at Harbor of Grace, so,
Right. Right.
you could definitely see that. So, if someone's listening to this podcast and they listen to you speak and they say, "You know what? I think that's me. I think my backpack's got some rocks in it, and I need to, before something happens, before I make a bad decision or before I actually engage in some sort of misconduct that my career could be ended over or worse. What should they do?
Yeah, reach out to us. The number for Harbor of Grace, 443-502-8606, or go to our website, harborofgracerecovery.com, are fantastic ways to get in touch with us. If you call that number, a human being answers that phone 24 hours a day. If you're looking for treatment right away, or you know someone who could use treatment right away, call us 24 hours a day. We answer the phone, and we will do our best to get them in as soon as possible. Vast majority of our admissions are same day admissions, particularly if someone is in crisis. We're going to get them in right away and get them help. Um, Agencies who are looking to support their members, strongly encourage you to contact us, work with us. We'll work with your departments. I regularly attend in-service training classes and present, but before in-service training classes, again, telling a little bit about my personal story and how I got familiar with the place, as well as the services that we offer. We'll partner with your agency to craft a message to your members and get them the help that they need. We're really passionate about what we do. This place was founded by Ken Byer, a first responder who had the vision 10 years ago to make a treatment facility that just treated his brother and sister first responders. That's what we've been doing for over 10 years. The vast majority of our staff are current or former first responders. We have over 750 years of public safety experience on our staff. I had 26 years with the Baltimore Police Department. That actually makes me a rookie around this place. The majority of staff members have 30 or more years of service with their departments, and we've treated people from over 750 different law enforcement and fire agencies from all 50 states to include Alaska and Hawaii. So the umbrella is big, and we wanna help your people.
Great. How about insurance? Everyone's wondering, okay, well, that's great. I need help. I know where to go for help now, and I have confidence. I mean, that you have the ability to do it. Who pays for it? How does it get paid for? Who do you work with? What's in network? Like, walk us through how that happened, how that works.
So again, we're in network with all the major insurance providers: Blue Cross Blue Shield, Kaiser, Aetna, Cigna, United, can go right on down the list. We're also in network now with TRICARE for those with military. We're also a Veteran Affairs community provider for our veterans as well. So when in doubt, call the main number. Let us know what insurance you have, and without billing anything, we'll just verify the coverage and let you know what, if any, out-of-pocket expenses there are associated with your stay. Generally speaking, all those that I just mentioned, all the big ones, is they, generally speaking, they cover the vast majority, if not all, treatment expenses. My personal 28-day stay inpatient here with Blue Cross Blue Shield cost me $8.32 out of pocket at discharge, which was the copay for a vitamin that I was given. That was a pharmacy copay. Everything else was covered. Ken does not want financials to be a burden to entry, and he works with patients patients, if they do have a high deductible or co-insurance or co-pays, or if there are fees associated, he's going to work with each individual to make sure that the finances are not a burden to entry. That is the majority of our patients. In a situation where someone has no health insurance whatsoever for whatever reason, maybe they were terminated from the job, or maybe they're a retiree that's aged out of retirement, again, call us. We have different organizations that we work with that can provide some scholarship funding and some support. And when we ourselves as an organization will provide scholarship funding and support again, to see that people are getting treated and that the finances aren't an obstacle.
Well, Rob, I can't thank you enough for what you do. I just think you and Ken and your whole staff there. I personally have toured your facility, so I'm familiar with what you're doing there, and I just think it's fantastic. It's very much needed. They need to have many more harbors of grace, I think, to take care of the enormity of the issue. It's a huge issue, and it's been largely ignored for decades. And it's so refreshing to see that you at Harbor of Grace, you're doing such a great job. You're a fantastic spokesman for the work that you're doing. You're growing. You're like a missionary. You're bringing the good news to people and telling them what is available to help them, and in a way that isn't going to bankrupt them. I just think it's fantastic. I really want to thank you also for joining us and getting that message out through our podcast. And I just hope that maybe there's somebody out there that needed to hear this and needed to know there's a resource or a place for them to go. Or there's somebody in law enforcement leadership who hears this and says, you know what, I need to partner with Harbor of Grace, because even though I don't have somebody that needs this right now, I might next month or next year, and I want to know where to go, and I want to be able to do it with no friction.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's great, and I want to thank you for joining us.
I appreciate that. And thank you, Jason, for the opportunity. Really, for departments and individuals out there, I just encourage you, come check us out. Come arrange a visit or a tour. We host agencies several days a week. They come out with their wellness coordinators or their peer team members or supervisors and get eyes on the place and get a feel for us. You'll see this isn't linoleum floors and fluorescent lighting, hospital environment. This is carpeting and soft walls and good people in a locker room environment where everybody kind of fits in, and the community is just phenomenal. And there's no one who's done this job for any length of time that couldn't benefit from some basic services. A checkup from the neck up, as we like to say. So yeah, if you don't already have a relation with us, give a call, arrange a tour, let's set something up, and we'd love to be able to help you out.
Thank you for listening to Holding the Line, a podcast about cops, courts, and crime. This episode is not only fascinating, but is so important. And if anyone needs help with their mental health or substance abuse, please check the show notes. There's lots of great organizations like Harbor of Grace that Rob runs, and we really need you to get out there and get help that you need or that your friends or family need in the first responder community. Again, thank you for listening to this week's episode. Please follow us on Substack and tune in next time to the next episode of Holding the Line.